And over here on the right-hand side of the card, I want you to try to do the same thing, but this is not hypothetical. I want you to get the authority. This is more the question, why do I give what I give? Whatever it is I give, why do I give what I give? Why do I give so much? Why do I give so little? Why do I give it all? I just want to know, why are you doing this? Why do you give? You can't think of anything else to spend your money on? Why are you doing this? And try to get your authority for why you and what you really do give. Whether it's very little, I give very little. Okay, why do you give very little? And just try to identify that. If it's a lot, okay, why do you give so much? And try to identify, why do I do that? And write your answer in the bottom right-hand side of the card. What are some of the answers that you wouldn't mind sharing with the rest of the group? Why do you give anything?
Support the church.
Huh?
Support the church.
Okay. What else comes to mind? Why do you give what you give? Obedience, love.
Helps release the hold that money has on you.
What'd you say?
It helps release the hold that money has on the heart.
Okay. Release the hold on release the hold money has on my heart.
God gives it back.
God gives it back. I'm just keep listening now. That's again. I'm trying to get whatever it is. I've taught this a number of times. I've heard everything from gratitude, love, joy, to selfishness, greed, other priorities. It's just really whatever you want to. Whatever it is whatever it is. But if you think about it, you can try to answer. Well, why do I give so much or so little or at all? Why do I give it all? And you'll have a reason. And that's all I'm trying to get you to do, because we're getting ready to do theology now. When you start looking at these things, you begin to see, first of all, there's often a difference between what we think we ought to give and what, in fact, we really do give. And that's just a fact. So you can hear things about tithe or all kinds of generosity and blah, blah, blah. And then on the other side of the coin, it's often, I don't much really want to talk about it. I'm not where I am, so there's sometimes a lot of contrast here. Now, the second thing you'll begin to pick up is the authorities for what we think we ought to do are different from the authorities for what we really do. The authorities for what we think we ought to do are external to us. Whether it's parents or the Bible or my prayer life to God, or whatever it may be, it's something out there that comes to me. Why do you think you ought to go 55 miles an hour when you're going down the highways in Arkansas? Because it's a speed limit sign. I can read it. I didn't just think it up and divine it. That's what I can read. And it's an external sign out there that tells me, well, why do you think you ought to put on a coat and tie if you're going to the finest restaurant in Little Rock? Friends told me I can't get in unless I'm dressed a certain way. I have to have, or whatever. There's something out there that informs that. But the authority for what we really do is much more internal. It tends to be stuff like, I have a desire to support the church. Or I have a sense, you may not, but I have a sense of obedience that prompts me. Or you may not, but I have a sense of love, and it flows out of that sense of love. Or I find that it releases money's hold on my heart. It tends to be an internal thing, because the realities are what we think we ought to do are clear and external, and they're out there. We may or may not do them. And what we really do tends to be an internal type of thing. And it's always been that kind of thing. Because the bottom line for us is we do what we want to do. Now, we're not going to always own up to that. We're not really going to do that and say, I do what I want to do. That sounds bad. So we learned to couch it. We learned to express it in different kinds of ways. If I were driving down the highways in Arkansas and I was put the cruise on, I don't know, 64, thinking speed limit says 55, but I think I'll go 64 because I think I can get away with it. I'm in a rush. I do what I want to do. That's why the cruise is on 64. Now, if the blue light goes off, where'd he come from? And out of the bushes comes this cop, highway patrol, and pulls me off the side of the road and knocks on the glass or roll down the window. And he says, do you know you're going 64? You want to tell me why you're going so fast? I'm not going to say, I do what I want to do. Now, what I'll probably say is, oh, kind of got away from me. That surprised me. Thank you, officer, for reminding me, because I always try to be very cautious. And if you have your collar on, I was deep in prayer and meditation, and it just got away from me. Or I was getting ready to make a pastoral call at the hospital, and I give it up. Bottom line is, I wanted to go 64, so I put the cruise on 64. That's what the truth is, even if I don't want to own up to it. And that is as old as the story of Adam and Eve. You can have the whole stinking garden. I'd like you to keep your mitts off one lousy tree. That's all. I'm not talking about tithe. You can have it all except one. You know the way human nature is. Yeah, I know, but after a while that gets on my nerves. That's one tree too many. Because and so they did the deal. And they ate from the fruit. And when God comes walking in the garden and says, come on, I can see X-ray's eyes. Get out of the bushes. Come over here. What did you do? You ate from the tree I asked you not to do. They're not going to say, I know, because we do what we want to do. What you do is you come up with an excuse. You come up with something at least. So Adam said, if this woman that you created, she came to me, I got to get along with her, and I got to, yeah, right. And Eve goes, it really wasn't my fault. It was this serpent. He beguiled me. That's what it was. The serpent didn't have any excuse, so he ends up crawling on his belly in the dust for the rest of his life anyway. But the point is that we do what we want to do, and we don't always own up to what we want to do, and that's the issue for us. That's the struggle theologically, whether the subject is stewardship or church attendance or discipleship or giving our life away or servant ministry or evangelism or planning a new church or whatever it is. At the end of the day, we need to be in touch with that reality because it's a very, very important part of the story of God's walk and work with us. Now, what are we going to do about the fact that we do what we want to do? That's where the theology comes in. The theology comes in when you start trying to say, oh, I got it. Because if I do what I want to do and not what I ought to do, then where's the good news? I actually want to say that the good news is not that we do what we ought to do. The good news is that we do what we want to do and God's got a plan. And I want us to hear it and understand it. And to understand it, you have to understand the story of the people of God. And all of us have read it, and sometimes we forget, but it all starts out with the story of Abraham. You remember Abraham, 12th chapter of Genesis. He's the guy that God said, look, if you'll leave what's familiar, leave your home, go to the place that I'll show you and take you, I will give you descendants like the stars of the sky, sands of the sea, and all of that. And he went. He became the father of the faithful. Muslims, Christians, and Jews all point back to Abraham. He kind of got the ball rolling. Now, he was doing what he wanted to do, and he headed out. And that started the story. Well, it took him quite a while, nearly a quarter of a century, but he eventually had a child. And the child's name was Isaac, and that means laughter. And the reason it was laughter is at their age, it was so preposterous that they would be having a child at this age. But Isaac is the one you probably remember that after he was born, God finally gave him the child. Then he said, I want you to take the child and sacrifice him to me. And Abraham, I don't know how I'm going to have stars in the sky, sands of the sea, and children if I do this, but maybe Hebrews suggests in the New Testament that he thought God could raise him back. I don't know what was going on in his mind. But anyway, he said, okay, I'll do it. And he said, come on, Isaac, let's go out and make a sacrifice on a field trip. Sure, Dad. So he grabbed some sticks and stuff, and they all went out into the mountain, and Isaac helped him find sticks and all that stuff and built a little altar and got ready to do this wonderful. He'd say, well, what are we going to do for a sacrificial animal? And Abraham grabbed Isaac and put him on the altar and pulled out his butcher knife, got ready to stick him good. And just about that time, God said, whoa. No joke, Abe, lighten up. There's a animal over here in the thicket. Why don't you get that animal and bring him back, and that can be your sacrifice. Well, that was Isaac. I have always suspected that Isaac left home at his earliest convenience and started his own his own little family. And yet there are two kids that he had, Jacob and Esau. The storyline continues through Jacob, so let me do him. Jacob is the one, you remember, he's a scoundrel. If you read it at all, he's just a piece of work. I always love that because the church is filled with people like me and others that are just a piece of work. But God can do wonderful things with them, but he's a piece of work. Now, Jacob is the guy that had a number of children, 12 sons. Now, he had his 12 sons from two different wives, Rachel and Leah, and two different concubines. We don't usually get into that in Sunday school. We just kind of gloss over it. And bottom line is he had a number of kids with a number of wives and concubines. Now, the problem with that kind of thing is that it tends to open the door to favoritism. His favorite wife had a son whose name was Joseph. And Joseph was the one that he liked the most. I'm not saying this is good parenting, but I'm just saying that's what I read the book. And he liked the most, and he gave him the coat of many colors, or if you like the other translations, the coat with long sleeves, whatever you think. But the bottom line is he would strut around the house in the special coat, and the older brothers were not amused. And they all thought, this is so obnoxious. But it was worse than that. The brothers would be sitting downstairs around the breakfast table eating cereal or whatever they ate in those days, and little Joe come barreling down the banister and come down and say, guess what God did with me last night in a dream? What? Well, he told me that all of y'all, big brothers, are going to be bowing down to me one day. What do you think about that? Not much. Not much. Well, then I had a second dream. And in the second dream, it's not just the big brothers, but also mom and dad, sun and moon. Everybody's going to be bowing down to me. What do you think about that? Not much. Anyway, they got to where they really did not like little Joe. So one day, the brothers were out in the field tending the flocks, and little Joe was sitting here with his dad in the air-conditioned tent watching the game, and Jacob said, how about you go out and check on the brothers? Sure, Dad. Grabbed his little coat of many colors and went trekking across sand dunes and got out there, and they saw him coming because that thing stands out, Technicolor kind of coat, and they said, here he is, let's kill him. And so I don't know if we ought to kill him, but we ought to do something. So they took him and threw him in a pit. And he's screaming and yelling. They're loving it. They're having dinner and having a good time, listening to him screaming. And then finally they saw this caravan going by. They whistled it down. Where y'all headed? They said, Egypt. And they said, great, we got this little rump we'd like to sell to you. What will you give us? And they made a deal and they gave it to you. Now, why did they do that? They did what they want to do. Now, you can't go back home, though, and tell your dad, Jacob, how was your day, sons? What'd you do? We sold little Joe into slavery into Egypt. Nobody's going to say that. So you have to come up with excuses. They got the coat of many colors, tore it up, splattered blood all over it, walked into the tent, put on their best hangdog look, and just turned down the TV and said, we are so depressed. We found this on the way home. Looks like a wolf ate little Joe. Well, the dad was devastated. The boys were thrilled about it, and Joseph was in Egypt about it because that's where the caravan stopped.